Hey, welcome in on this Monday post-Thanksgiving. I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich with your live weather impact tonight. We're talking about some wet weather heading our way. Some of us will see some wintry weather. December 1st is a big day on the calendar. That is the beginning of meteorological and climatological winter. I know what your calendar says at home. The solstice is the beginning of winter. That's astronomical seasons. For weather and climate records, we always start with the full calendar month. So all the records for today, any rainfall, high, low temperatures, that all goes into our winter records. And right on cue, we've got a winter-like storm. And when I say that, don't think snow and ice for everybody. In the Carolinas, a typical winter storm is cold, miserable rain. And that's kind of what's heading our way. You can see the system developing back to the west. It's not that there's not some cold and snow and ice with this. It's just, it's pretty far to the north. So as this heads our way tonight, we are going to see rain develop. And yes, some parts of the area will see some ice. And in particular, we're talking about the mountains. So when we look at the current temperatures here at 6:30, you can see it's already 32 in Boone, 31 in Jefferson. So it's sub-freezing up there already. So as this first batch of precipitation heads our way, it will fall in the form of freezing rain. Maybe a little bit of sleet, but primarily freezing rain. And remember, freezing rain falls as a liquid. It freezes after it falls. So I love the analogy of, the difference between sleet and freezing rain. Sleet's like sprinkles on a donut. Freezing rain is like the glaze on Krispy Kreme. It actually falls as a liquid but then solidifies on contact. So we've got winter weather advisories in effect. They go into effect at 7 p.m., but honestly the first precipitation is probably going to be closer to midnight, and it goes through noon tomorrow, but we could actually see that come to an end sooner. So there's a little buffer built in here. But this is for ice accumulation, 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch on eastern facing slopes, so slick elevated road surfaces. Some branches and trees could get some ice on them for sure, but it's probably not going to be enough to cause widespread power disruption. Typically you need about 1/4 inch or higher for that. So icy mix in the mountains with slick spots, but even there it's going to change to rain. Heavy rain east of the mountains, that includes the Charlotte area, and while it's going to be above freezing, it's not exactly going to be warm. It's going to be in the 30s and 40s. So this is a miserable cold rain. When does it start? Well, for most of us around midnight and after. Now, this would be the perfect rain event if it all fell overnight and ended by morning. But unfortunately, it will probably linger well after sunrise, and that means the morning commute gets wet through about mid-morning. So overnight rain chances about as high as they get, 90%. And temperatures in the 30s. Notice Boone and Jefferson kind of stuck, just below freezing. And then tomorrow, it's not going to last all day. It's going to be a pretty dramatic change from the morning to the afternoon. The morning temperatures will be, in the 30s, but by the afternoon will likely be close to 50 degrees as we get into the afternoon. So what's going to fall? As I mentioned in some of our earlier shows online and on Linear, about 99% of us are going to see just rain. So this is not a huge winter impact, and it's really not a bad thing overall because we need the rain. We're in a drought. So this is the kind of rainfall we need. Unfortunately, it just happens at the wrong time during the morning commute. So that's why we're alerting you, just weather impact alert, not that it's severe or that dangerous, just going to be disruptive for some travel in the morning, likely more of an inconvenience setup here. Heavy rain everywhere, mountain ice early, so please be careful if you're in the mountains. If you are watching us in the mountains, we're likely going to have some school delays, maybe even closures tomorrow. Make sure you have the warmer gear. This is a situation where just not the umbrella and the rain jacket is going to cut it. You're probably going to need the heavy parka or jacket because this is going to be a cold rain. So why is it going to be rain or just ice? If you look at our graphic here, precipitation types, this kind of tells you we've got this warm air aloft. Believe it or not, tomorrow, down at the surface in Charlotte, it might be 37, 38 degrees. But up around 5,000 feet, the temperature is probably going to be like 45 degrees. So it's actually going to be warmer above our heads. In the mountains, there's just enough cold air trapped there that there will be a refreeze. And again, even there, eventually this warm nose, we call it, will win out, and it'll change everything to just rain, even in the mountains. Look how widespread this rain event is. I mentioned earlier tonight that this is the most widespread, heaviest rain event we have seen in almost 2 months. So this is much needed rain, even though it's a miserable rain at that. It clears out quickly for Tuesday afternoon and most of Wednesday. And then we'll have another system we'll have to watch going into the end of the week. So which areas will see a negative impact in the morning? It's primarily the areas in orange. Those are the areas that could have the significant icing that cause some slick spots. So around Old Fort, Eastern Henderson County, Buncombe County, think of most of Avery County looks like pretty good ice, and then Ashe County as well. But those areas, Jonas Ridge, Pinola, Banner Elk, Newland, those areas typically see a lot of ice. Blowing Rock, same kind of setup. Fleetwood to Jefferson, and then up towards Sparta. Those are the areas that tend to get the most ice. Flat Top Mountain as you're going up into Virginia. That's the area up there where they have the fog signs and usually high winds. That's right when you cross over the border from North Carolina and Virginia. Here's the hour-by-hour look. You'll see, again, pink is ice. Now, a lot of this might evaporate before reaching the ground, so it might take a while, but that will actually cool the temperature down into the 30s. So you see the ice through 3 a.m. Look how widespread the rain is by then. 6 a.m., this is all rain possibly by now. Might be some lingering ice in the mountains, but notice Boone's actually warmer than Charlotte. That's that warm air loft. Higher elevations actually will have warmer air as that warm nose moves in. Temperatures in the upper 30s, not exactly warm, but above freezing. Heaviest rain around 8, 9 a.m. south and east of I-85, and then by lunchtime, this all shifts off to the east, and we actually dry things out pretty quickly by the afternoon, and eventually we see dry conditions. So, how much ice are we talking about, and where are we going to see that ice? I showed you the impacts. Let me show you just briefly where I see the most significant ice, and I'll back this up because it's really not going to be Wednesday. This is all going to be Tuesday morning. You'll see right through about 4, 5, 6 o'clock, and then it comes to an end. The rainfall, pretty prolific rainfall here for some of us. We will see some pretty good rainfall for most of our area. Like I mentioned earlier, this could be some of the heaviest rain we've seen in quite some time, maybe an inch or two possible for areas south and east of I-85. That would be the most significant rainfall, since you got to go back, I think all the way back to mid to late October. Now, your Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast shows these temperatures are going to stay on the coolish side for this time of year. It's not crazy cold, but it's not above average. It's going to be below average most of this. Remember, we are in December, so the average high is about 58 right now. Average lows in the mid 30s. So this is chilly for this time of year, but not as crazy chilly as you might think. We've just had such a warm November, which I'll talk about coming up here after the break. We had really, really warm November, ended up being top 15 warmest on record. The 10-day forecast shows the temperatures staying on the cool side, but a couple chances of rain this week. We had one yesterday. We have one tonight and tomorrow, and then Friday into Saturday, another round of rain going into the weekend. That system's interesting. I'll talk about that coming up here as well, because potentially we could have a little bit of wintry weather or parts of the area with that as well. But as we go into next week, you'll see those temperatures staying cool to start the week, but then possibly back above normal by Wednesday into Thursday. Okay, so Tim Buckley is not with us tonight, but we're going to talk more about this wintry setup. We'll talk about the end of hurricane season. I'll also talk about November and most of fall and how warm it was coming up in 2 minutes right after the break. So stick around. We'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, welcome back, everybody. Again, Tim Buckley is a day off here, I think, so he is not going to join us tonight. So it's just me, me just to talk about our first day of meteorological winter. We've got plenty of weather to talk about. We can look back at the end of hurricane season as well. December 1st is kind of like one of those days on the calendar for us as meteorologists. It's always the beginning of a new season. And I talk about this often, and I think this always confuses people because growing up, you probably didn't really study meteorological or climatological seasons. For whatever reason, every calendar has astronomical seasons. And while I love astronomical seasons, the equinoxes and the summer and autumnal equinoxes, as well as the solstices, the vernal and the summer equinox, all of these basically are based on the sun angle and where the sun is, not what's going on with the weather. So forever, and when I say forever, since weather records have started, we've always kept weather records on whole calendar months. And the reason that is, it's consistent. It lines up better with the temperature cycle for the year across the world, and we don't have weird things because remember the solstice, the equinoxes, they can be on two different dates. Some parts of the world it starts one day, it starts the next. You really couldn't use that for weather data because you would have a mixed match. So December 1st through the end of February, except for leap year, which is 29th, it's usually February 28th, that's winter. And so those are the average highs in Charlotte during the winter. We start at 58. The coldest we get for an average, and again, this is the average. It can always be colder and warmer than this, as we're seeing right now. Beginning of January through the middle and end of January, that's the coldest part of winter, the heart of winter. Our average high drops to 52. By the end of February, believe it or not, the average high is all the way back up close to 60 degrees. So pretty wild that you can have such a big range in our winter, but that's kind of typical for our winter season. December 1st is also a big day on the calendar for meteorologists because it marks the end of hurricane season, which ended yesterday, the last day of November. And this was a very unique hurricane season. You see all the storms we had out there. For the first time in a decade, since 2015, we did not have a hurricane make landfall in the continental United States. We did have a tropical storm, that was Chantal, and ironically enough, it did impact the Carolinas. I think folks forget about this. If Tim was here, he would definitely be talking a lot about this because this caused widespread flooding between Greensboro and Raleigh, and actually there was a federal disaster declaration for this area. Basically, Burlington area saw extensive flooding and damage. So this was an area that saw significant flooding. And I also will mention Barry. You see Barry there. It made landfall in Mexico, not in the United States. But what people forget about Barry, and it should be very memorable, the remnants of Barry actually moved up into Texas on 4th of July and caused the deadly Kerr County flooding, flash flooding, which killed over 117 people, I think, as a last check. So that was actually a pretty significant event as well. And I think a lot of folks will remember Melissa, obviously, which was a Category 5 and devastated parts of western Jamaica. But that was a dangerous, dangerous hurricane. Here's a look at the list. We ended up with above average activity, albeit not affecting the U.S. And that's a really key part. Every time we start hurricane season, we love giving you the hurricane season forecast. You'll see all the headlines talking about a bad or good season based on the number of storms. The number of storms really don't matter. It's where they go. And this year, this was a bad season for areas like Jamaica. But for the United States, I think most folks would say it was a pretty good year since we didn't have a direct impact from a major hurricane. But that's really how you should gauge a hurricane season, in my opinion, is based on the impacts, not the number of storms. But we ended up getting to Melissa, which was a Category 5. We actually had 3 Category 5 hurricanes this year, so that was pretty significant. So we had some pretty intense hurricanes. So that's another key part of December 1st, the end of hurricane season. Now, since we are in meteorological winter, we turn our attention directly to winter. We've got what would technically be a winter storm since it's occurring in the winter months, but it will not have winter weather for all of us. This is primarily going to be a rainmaker for areas outside of the mountains. And even in the mountains, we're looking at an ice event. So if you're looking for big snow out of this, don't look at this storm because this is not a snowstorm. This is going to be ice or rain for the Carolinas. This is really kind of a typical winter storm for us, especially early in the season. We already have winter weather advisories up for all of our mountain counties and adjacent foothills. That includes Avery, Ashe, Watauga counties, Upper Burke and Caldwell counties, as well as Wilkes County, Yancey and Mitchell County for our viewers there, and even Allegheny County up there to the north, Yadkin County as well, north of areas and states. So it doesn't mean some areas like South Mountains or some elevated areas and the Unifor region might see a little ice up on some towers, but not down at the surface. We're not expecting that as we go into tonight. You can see the overnight temperatures, the areas of biggest concern, where it's going to be near freezing. 29 in Boone, 29 Jefferson, 33 Wilkesboro, 33 Mount Airy. Close call there. But everybody else, I wouldn't call it warm, but with temperatures in the mid to upper 30s, it's going to be warm enough to make it liquid. And it's not just at the ground that we watch for this, it's above our head. So why is this mostly going to be rain or ice? Well, we've got something called a warm nose in the profile, and the atmosphere, remember, is three-dimensional, so we often think of what's happening down at the ground. We call this a warm nose because if you look at a profile, that would look like the nose, and if you had the eyes up here. So we call this warm nose kind of sticking in here. How thick it is going to dictate whether we have snow, ice, or rain, and in this case, we're certainly going to have primarily rain in this setup. So when we look at this, for us in Charlotte, you're looking at primarily all rain. In the mountains, there's cold enough air trapped at the surface, and it can get trapped for a while, that we see freezing rain. So that means it's liquid water falling from the sky, but it hits the ground and then freezes after it falls. So the best way to look at this, people sometimes confuse sleet and freezing rain. Sleet is like sprinkles. It's hard, it bounces. It's like putting sprinkles on a donut. Freezing rain is like the glaze. It falls as a liquid, and then it glazes over and hardens on stuff. So the freezing rain is actually the worst because that can, like glaze on a donut, can stick to everything, and it causes issues with power lines, tree branches, all that stuff. And so the area that we're watching for that glaze of ice is going to be the mountains and foothills. That's where we will see ice overnight into early tomorrow morning. But even there, I expect it to change to rain sometime shortly after sunrise. That's the million-dollar question in these setups. How quickly does it change over to rain? Some areas are notorious for holding on to cold air and ice, and I'm talking about you folks near Jonas Ridge and Pinola, Upper Burke County, Eastern Avery County, Linville area. That area in particular is just, I've been here long enough to just know that's where the cold air gets trapped, and also a little bit of lift causes the air to cool down even more. That's a notorious area where the cold and the ice will hold on longer. So if you're in that area watching us, be prepared for probably more ice than anything. And that's an area, if we're going to see a power outage or two, it's an area I'm watching. Everybody else is just a miserable cold rain. Now, one of the unique things about freezing rain, I talked about this on my vlog this morning, is it's a self-limiting process. And what do I mean by this? This is a little bit of science. So latent heat is released from water when it freezes. You're probably saying, what? I don't remember 8th grade science. It's way over my head. Let me kind of put this in something you might understand a little bit more. So when you put water on the stove to boil it, right? You add heat to it through your stove. You keep adding heat, the energy gets into the water, eventually gets hot enough it starts boiling. Well, the reverse happens when you cool or freeze water. You have to remove the heat from the water. And when you do that, where does that heat go? It goes into the air. So when freezing rain happens, the droplets are freezing as they're falling because you're removing heat from the raindrops. That goes into the air. And so unless you have a constant resupply of cold air, eventually freezing rain will shut itself off, basically causing it to become all rain because there's no more cold air left. The latent heat actually heats the air up. And this is also, by the way, during frost and freeze season, why farmers spray their crops with water. It's not an insulating thing. Ice is not an insulator. They're actually using that latent heat from the freezing of the water to go into the plant to keep it from freezing. So that's the process they're using to help keep their plants alive. And there's a hard freeze, and you'll see farmers in Florida do this during citrus season here, strawberries and other trees and fruits. They'll spray with water to kind of protect them from a freeze because it's that latent heat of freezing that we're using. So who are the folks that are going to most likely see that ice? It's in the mountains, right? We just mentioned that. Here's the timing for areas like Boone. But that's why eventually it shuts off in Boone, because as it rains, there's not a constant supply of cold air moving in. Eventually this will shut itself off because the warm nose and that latent heat release eventually warms it up just enough. And when I say warm, we only want to get above 32.0. Remember, 32.1, it's water. 32.0, it's ice. So it's a very small difference. And sometimes we forget how minor that change can be. That's why winter weather is one of the most difficult things to forecast in our area. It's so many variables, but you're literally down to a tenth of a degree difference between ice, snow, and rain oftentimes, and at different levels of the atmosphere. It is very, very hard to forecast minor differences like that. And why we get so much ice in setups like this here, because of something we call cold air damming. Cold air gets pushed down the eastern slopes of the mountains. I will have a bunch of people tell me that they think the cold air stays away from us because of the mountains, but we actually get more cold air because of the mountains trapping it on the eastern facing slopes. Arctic air, sometimes can't make it over the mountains, but it can make it around the mountains and get trapped against the mountains. So especially when there's Arctic air over New England, the Northeast, the Great Lakes, that cold air gets pushed down the eastern facing slopes and gets trapped there as warm, humid air surges up from the Gulf, and that rides up and over the cold air, and that's why we get these icy messes around here. And we get a lot of them. We used to be the ice capital of America, but now we haven't had a really significant ice event in a while. But we're kind of notorious here in the Carolinas for the CAD, or cold air damming. That's an acronym we use. There's the area that will see the worst icing overnight into tomorrow morning. It's all in orange. That's the medium risk for impacts, and impacts mean travel, branches, power outage possibly. Typically, this is more of a travel issue in the low to medium range. High and extreme would be more tree and power line issues. And the areas that we're talking about, and I'll just kind of show you the significant ice areas, and this will really help you kind of, I'll animate this so you can see the areas with the most significant ice. It's really those areas. I'm going to pack it up because it's not going to go all the way into the afternoon, probably around 11 a.m. So Jonas Ridge jumps off there, Blowing Rock, Newland, Banner Elk, Boone, Jefferson. Notice the other side of the mountains in Tennessee, none of this, because the cold air won't be trapped there. It'll actually be warmer over in Tennessee than it will be back our way. So what will this look like tonight? We'll go hour by hour. We'll lead you right through this to kind of set this up. Could take a while for the first batches of rain or moisture to reach the ground because some of the air is pretty dry. Evaporative cooling takes place, so that will actually cool us down. That's why you see temperatures falling tonight into the 30s. The peak of this to me is like 3, 4 in the morning when we have heavy rain east of the mountains, but areas like Boone and Jefferson could be right around that freezing mark. Anywhere you see pink, that's ice. The mix is not snow and sleet, it's ice and rain, so freezing rain or just good old-fashioned rain. And remember, the only way you know it's freezing rain is if it's pouring rain and the temperature is 32. So you got to have a thermometer to kind of gauge whether you have freezing rain. That's why be very cautious if you're driving in the mountains. Watch the temperature gauge on your dashboard. Don't take that as the gospel because those thermometers in your vehicle sometimes can be off by a degree or two. And in a situation like that, that could be the difference between you thinking it's rain or thinking it's ice. So just treat it all as ice if it's even close to 32 degrees driving in the mountains. For the Piedmont, 6 a.m., a lot of folks get up, getting ready for work and school. It's going to be pouring. I mean, this is the heaviest rain we've seen in months, and it's 39 degrees. So you don't need just a thin rain jacket. You need the parka, as I mentioned, because this is the kind of rain that is just going to be pouring. And with all the leaves down and people still clearing them, I think we'll see some minor ponding of water in roadways because some of these storm drains are clogged up with leaves right now. If it's trash day for you tomorrow and the leaves are out there, just make sure those drains are cleared out. We don't need added water on the roadways and then throw some wet leaves. It makes it even worse. But by 11 a.m., notice the rain starts to shift out of here, and we actually see some pretty dramatic improvements, maybe as soon as 10, but certainly by midday, it's all gone. So the evening commute is fine. It should be completely dried out and good conditions. Now, we'll have to watch. Most of the rain that falls will dry up during the day. It's pretty breezy. It's pretty dry. So I don't anticipate a refreeze Wednesday morning just because things dry out pretty quickly, especially if you have several hours before that happens. And with wind and dry air, I don't expect a refreeze. Now, in the mountains might be a different story because the temperature could hover close to freezing for a little bit longer. So we'll keep an eye on that, but I'm not anticipating a big refreeze. We'll be back near 50 on Wednesday and then see temperatures stay pretty cool the rest of the week. Now, how much rain are we talking about? I mentioned what a big deal this is because it hasn't rained in a long time. I mean, I'm going to look real quick. The last heavy rain that we've had obviously was not in November because we only had like a quarter of an inch in the entire month of November. So if I look back, I got to look back another month. So let me look back at November real quickly. Taking a second to load as it loads up. So November's total rainfall for the entire month, 0.49, half an inch. That's 30 days, only half an inch. Tomorrow morning, we could double that in one day, not even one day, a half a day. If we go back to October, I'm going to go back and see the last time we had over a half an inch in a day. You have to go back to October 29th, 0.57, but the last time we had an inch of rain in a single day, October 27th. Okay, we had 1.2 or 1.16 inches. Between October 27th and 29th, we had almost 2 inches of rain. So that was the last real significant rain, about a month or so ago, even a little bit longer. So it's been a while. So this is much needed rain. Remember, we're in drought. We'll take every drop we can get. Now, I mentioned something about late week, possibly another round. Well, the cold air isn't exactly going away. It looks like it's going to stick around, at least below average temperatures. And we've got another system heading our way Friday into Saturday. It looks a lot like this one. The only difference is I think it could be a tad colder. Now, I don't think this will be a winter storm for all of us, but I do think there's a higher chance of some snow for parts of the area and maybe some of us. You could see in particular the mountains could see snow, and even maybe the Unifor region up into our northern counties to Greensboro and Raleigh. This will be something to watch. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty here. It's Monday. I'm talking about Friday, so we're 4 or 5 days out. 4 to 5 days out, it's really not in that time range where you have a really concrete setup on this. And there's some uncertainty here. And even looking at this is probably the coldest of all the guidance we look at. It's still kind of marginal. So other guidance shows little precipitation, much further south or north with warmer air or no moisture. So it's something to keep an eye on if you're planning travel Friday into Saturday, because it does look like this could be a pretty good coastal low that cranks up and moves up the coast. By Saturday, it moves out pretty quickly and should be long gone by the time the ACC championship takes place on Saturday night in Uptown. So just a heads up there that there could be a system Friday into Saturday. And I'll show you our Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast again, just to give you an idea what this week looks like. Average highs continuing to drop into the mid-50s, average lows in the mid-30s. We'll likely be below that most of this time frame. Tomorrow morning, please stay weather impact alert for the heavy rain across the Piedmont with ice up in the mountains. As we show you the 10-day forecast, give you a nice long look at this. First 10 days, now 11 days of December. It's going to actually be below average for most of this until we get to Wednesday the 10th. That's when temperatures look to jump back above slightly. And again, just a degree or two with temperatures in the 50s. Thanks for joining us tonight. Stick around. We've got more news coming up after the break.